Welcome to Metabolic Matters podcast, where we embark on conversations with thought leaders, disruptors, change agents, and passionate souls. Together, we'll delve into what truly matters to them. And you'll learn how to metabolize this newfound wisdom so you can transform your own metabolic health. Now let's meet today's guest. Welcome. I am so excited to have this conversation today, despite the fact that I've probably had this conversation maybe thousands of times, which may or may not be of news to some of you, but maybe that's where we should start. We just heard the amazing bio of this brilliant man before me, but a little bit of full transparency here. This man is also my partner in crime in many things. We're coming on, gosh, Steve, 3+ decades together, meeting over a fetal pig, an undergraduate anatomy physiology course all of these years ago. Perhaps it was woven in the stars that our paths would collide in changing the world as we know it in the metabolic health space. I don't know. I think back to where, between our relationship, between co-facilitating cancer retreats, presenting at medical conferences together, even sharing tiny little stages where both of us were vying to stay on the podium, co-founding a nonprofit hospital and research institute, co-creating a for-profit data platform. I don't know. I'd say we complement each other pretty well over these decades. What would you add to that conversation? And welcome, Steve Ottersberg.
Thank you, young lady. Well, I think that we saw early on in our relationship, but I think that it started to become really apparent to people outside of our relationship when you first started practicing. Because when Nasha first started practicing, I was working as a drug rep for Merck Pharmaceutical, and people were like, "Oh my God, she's a naturopath and acupuncturist. How can you two live in harmony together if you're working for the pharmaceutical industry? You're the enemy." Like, no, it's not like that. Because what Nasha realized early on in her career is that not all, a large percentage of her patients were on some sort of pharmaceutical agent, and she needed to know what she could do to support them with Chinese medicine and naturopathic therapies to help get them through their pharmaceutical therapies most effectively. And I think that was one of the big turning points when people started asking me that question. I started to realize, oh God, our careers are perfectly woven in together and into our crazy brain mesh that we have been melding since the 90s.
That should be been melding since the 90s. So super excited to have you here for all things metabolic in Metabolic Matters, Steve. And again, yes, beyond the fact that you are my husband, you are also one of the smartest people I know in this space. And I know a lot of the people who already know you, who are listening in, would give an amen to that and full-heartedly agree. But I want to know how you, the brilliant biochemist that you are, would explain metabolic health to a fifth grader.
Okay. So for a fifth grader, we would drive up to the gas pump. At the gas pump, there's 87, there's 89, there's 91 octane, and then there's diesel. If you are a beat up old Pontiac 74 Pontiac Le Mans, you can pump all of the low octane gas into your system that you want. It's carbureted. There's nothing that's going to come of harm. And you're not going to get any benefit from high octane in your old beater Pontiac. But if you're driving a Ferrari, you need 91 octane. And if you are even really a super tuner with your Ferrari, you're not even going to go to the gas pump. You're going to go and buy aviation fuel, like what we did with our dirt bikes in high school, because we tuned our dirt bikes so much in high school that we would put aviation gas in our dirt bikes. And if you drive a diesel and you put any of that other garbage in your diesel, you're going to destroy it the first time you start your engine. And that's how metabolic health works, is The fuel that you choose to put in your body is going to determine whether you live a life of health or you live a life of disease, and it's up to you.
Wow. I mean,
So
first of all, I'm
choose your
hoping.
pump correctly.
Nice. Well, first of all, you guys will learn very quickly that Steve is the master of anecdotes and of storytelling. So that's the first time you've ever used that one with me in 32 plus years. So I'm pretty impressed with how that came to be. So, why do you think how beautifully simple that gas tank or that gas pump analogy is? Why do you think this is so difficult for so many in the medical field and even just in the layperson world to grasp around metabolic health or the lack thereof?
Because globally, the public has been lied to about everything associated with food and health. If you think about, in the 1960s, there was a Harvard professor that for $50,000 published a fraudulent study um, trying to demonize fat, saying that sugar is okay, but fat will kill you. And from that, we had this whole low fat garbage that we went through in the early 70s that probably killed more people than I don't even want to say. But the whole thing is, anytime you turn on the television or you listen to any type of media, anything you hear about food is a lie. Everything that you have ever been told. Like Wilford Brimley, is he still alive? He was such a dear person that it just breaks my heart that he had the diabetes, but he still thought that he could cure the diabetes with the Quaker oats. Well, sorry, Wilford, I loved you as a child, but it was the Quaker oats that gave you the diabetes and all the other things that are just horrible with our food system today.
Well, it's funny because you are definitely no stranger to metabolic health on a personal level. Okay, so you and I have, like I said, the listeners now know 3+ decades, but that also means our lives and our own health and that of our loved ones and our family members are also intimately woven into this story for us as well. So, and you kind of segue nicely in with sharing about this, person we grew up watching on TV, talking about his diabetes and what was going on there, but you got to see firsthand and you got to know metabolic disease so intimately. Can you talk to us a little bit about what you witnessed and how that informed how you think today?
Yeah, I mean, my early childhood, my mom's parents both died of cancer before I was born, so I never even met my mom's parents. And I'm trying to remember how old I was when my Uncle Ed died. And he died young. I think Ed was probably 56, 50, not even 58 at the most, and died of a heart attack. And at that time, you know, we didn't really, this is way before statins. There weren't even that many good blood pressure drugs back then. This was in the 70s. And so we didn't really have a good grasp on cardiovascular disease being related to diet and lifestyle back then. We probably had some idea that his cigarette smoking was a contributor, but everybody smoked in the 70s. All my aunts and uncles smoked. And, the the really big moment for me was as a young teenager. I think I was 13 when my brother Bob was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. And obviously, I was 13 years old. It hit me like a freight train through my forehead, and it made a big impact on how I move forward in terms of what I chose to eat and what I chose to do in terms of exercise and sleep and rest and all of the things that we now know are absolutely important for your metabolic health.
I'm going to pause you there because you and I met early on in our understandings of health and well-being in general. And we also subscribe to a lot of ideas of what health was or what constituted health or what
Oh,
promoted health. And
oh, we
dare
were.
I say, yeah.
Well, and here's one of the misconceptions that led Nasha and I awry. So you heard about my mom's parents, and on my mom's side of the family, I think with one exception, all of the firstborn of my generation, every firstborn male of my generation died of some type of cancer. And my mom had 5 or 6 brothers and sisters. I can't believe I don't remember that number. But I think what Nasha is referring to is I made choices based on my brother's cancer diagnosis. And then my dad developed type 2 diabetes. And in the time after my brother's diagnosis and the time that I met Nasha, I can't remember. I think we were both vegetarian when we met.
Yep.
And we were both sick as hell when we met. I was trying to train for the 92 Olympics for triathlon on a vegetarian diet that was not even remotely nutritionally
And
balanced.
maybe a carbitarian diet would be a better
Yeah. Well, we
description.
worked at restaurants and we didn't have a dime to our name, so I can't even count the number of baked potatoes that we ate because they're throwing out a dozen baked potatoes at the end of the night and buckets of rice, and I would ride my bike home with 2 dozen baked potatoes and 2 gallons of rice
Literally.
in my backpack, and this is what we would eat for the rest of the week
Yeah.
is potatoes and rice because it was free.
And it was vegetarian.
And it was vegetarian, so it has to be healthy. Oh God, Nation and I both had in our 20s some pretty severe health issues because of how horrible our vegetarian diet was. And that's the thing is that there has, as long as I've been alive, been this misconception that vegetarian equates to healthy, and I will never ever subscribe to that belief again as long as I live.
Well, I would like to throw out there and play the devil's advocate that I do believe there is a good way to eat a healthy, metabolically flexible, inducing vegetarian diet. I work with patients all over the world who have come from spiritual belief systems and whatnot, but it takes a major overhaul to their traditional diets and a
Mm-hmm.
major overhaul to their traditional belief systems to help them be successful at this. And still, at the end of the day, they must still supplement with some animal based nutrients such as fish oil, vitamin D3, vitamin B12. Maybe just take a quick moment from your biochemistry world why the vegetarian or vegan forms of those specific nutrients I just mentioned are lackluster at best.
So number one, you have to understand. Let's pick on B12 first of all because B12 is a massive molecule. It has a cobalt in the center of this massive framework that's called a coronoid. And coronoids that are utilizable by our methylation system are different than what other organisms can use. So keep that in mind as we go through this discussion. So our earliest method of measurement of B12 in foods was a microbiological method where they took an organism that could utilize B12 and they would set this organism up in a test tube, add the extract from a food to it, and depending on how turbid the mixture became, equated to the amount of B12 that was present. That doesn't sound precise or accurate to anybody. Even if you're not an analytical chemist, that should make your stomach roll because turbidity is not precise or accurate. And if you don't know what turbidity means, it's just cloudiness in a solution. So we're measuring how cloudy a solution comes when you add a food extract to it. Well, that's kind of random. But here's the crazy thing about this is this microorganism that's turning the water cloudy in the presence of B12 can use forms of B12 that humans can't use. These are known as lower level coronoids that are utilizable by microorganisms that we can't use. So our initial B12 measurements in our food were false. They were falsely low. Since then, we've developed methods of analysis known as liquid chromatography, mass spectrometry, and this method is very specific, very selective, very precise, and very accurate to very low levels. And the key with that is B12 is found in pretty tiny levels in our bloodstream, and it doesn't exist in massive quantities in our food. So in order for us to really even know, are we getting the right form of B12 in our diet, we have to have our instruments in the lab calibrated to what is that right form of B12 in the first place.
So, I'm gonna take. I'm going to bring you around. First of all, remember fifth graders. I'm trying to keep you in that zone, Mr. Crazy Mad Scientist, which I love. But specifically when people say, can you get B12
No,
and vitamin D?
I'm not going to let you finish. No, you cannot get. I'm not
Just
even
like
going to
home,
let you
just like home.
finish the. It's just propaganda. It's just people trying to sell you garbage food that does not. Sorry, here's the thing.
This is so much fun. You guys, this is really what happens at my household on a regular basis. We get to provoke each other onto our soapboxes. So bring it, mad science.
All right.
So specifically, babe,
Even
let me bring it back. So the B12, the vitamin D, so the form of B12 that's coming from algae, for instance, or the form of D2 that's coming from mushrooms, or the form of algal oils, for the fish oil alternative in the vegan community. What say thee to those products specifically? Because I know we're going to get bombarded with, but you can get all these from all these places. Yes,
here's
and what's the
and And I have to come back to what is clinically relevant because I don't tell people to do B12 measurements in their blood because I don't care how much B12 you have in your blood
end?
because it doesn't matter if you're taking 5 handfuls if it's vegan or if it's from an actual beneficial source of B12. If your body isn't utilizing that form of B12, we can check for that in blood tests and in urine tests. So if your homocysteine is high and your methylmalonic acid are high, that means that whatever you're taking, you're not utilizing. And to me, that's way more important than what's in your food.
Nice.
Because if you're not utilizing the form of a vitamin that's in your food, it will show up in lab tests. And when anybody tries to tell me that, oh, I'm misguided about my opinions about vegetarianism and veganism, great, but show me your labs. Show me what your homocysteine is on your fake B12. Show me what your methylmalonic acid is on your fake B12. And if you can manage on that, then great. But I can tell you that most people who are B12 functional deficient are
Mm,
going to have high homocysteine and high methylmalonic acid.
yeah.
And this is where I don't want to have discussions with people about theories about vegetarianism, carnivorism, because it's just an ideology at that point. I mean, I could spout off theories all day long about what I feel about, you know, vegetarianism and glyphosate and killing billions of animals to produce your tofu. But my opinion doesn't matter as much as what your lab test matters when we're talking about health. And to me, evidence is more important. If you can prove me wrong with data, I'll shut my mouth. But if you don't have data, don't try to sway your opinion on me about something that you don't have data on.
And I think to round this out, since I don't think I'm ever going to get you to answer the D2 or the fish oil question. Again, guys, this is the normal day to day in my household, but I'm thinking that this is exactly it. We use the methodology of test, assess, address, don't guess. We
Yeah.
say, okay, well, take those forms of these nutrients, and then you can run like an omega-6, omega-3 fatty acid panel and see how that's working for you. You can run 125 and 25 OH vitamin D levels and see how that's working with you. You can run the homocysteine, the methylmalonic acid, the MCV, MCH, MCHC from a basic CBC to know how these things are working for you. You can even do a good old physical exam and often be able to tell signs and symptoms of deficiencies in any one of those nutrients, including a lot of others. We can do these kind of physical nutritional exams, physical nutritional assessments as well. So I think that's a really powerful point to land on and finish up this, kind of tie it up with a nice little bow of our dogmas have gotten us into a lot of trouble. And I know that I'm spewing a little bit here, but living with you when we both were very hardcore vegetarians, we met each other. Then as my health I was trying to deal with my own cancering process, veganism seemed to be the way to go. And we really hunkered down really hard in that for several years. In fact, raw food vegan for a period of time. And my health became even more challenged. And it's not even a criticism about the diet. It's about what I wasn't getting in my diet or how I wasn't applying it. You were in the same place. I mean, by the time you were in your 30s, you were pre-diabetic, whatever that word means, you were arthritic, you were having surgeries for a knee that would no longer bend, you were over-exercising, undernourished, all the things. And this is where you and I hear all the time, well, I was healthy. I was a marathon runner. I was a vegetarian. I did all my yoga classes. This is where we're trying to break some of the mythology around what are perceived health-giving things in the world. And so to show the folks that you and I didn't like wake up, sprout from the ground with these belief systems we have today, these have been 30 years in the making. So I wanted
and some hard knocks that made us change course. That's exactly. The thing is there's a lot of people that understand, why did you start eating meat again? Well, because I wasn't healthy. I hit the wall so hard as a 20-something triathlete that I went into grad school as a nationally ranked competitive triathlete, and I left graduate school at 30 years old walking with a cane because I had a benign tumor, the synovium, in my right knee. That's kind of a not so subtle signal that my health trajectory was way off course.
Yeah. And I think that's just it, right? Like teaching people to listen intently to themselves and truthfully to themselves, because we still often have our cognitive dissonance of still doing the same things we know are not good for us and trying to make all of the excuses that they are. But you're suggesting, if I'm hearing you correctly, that the data can help reveal some of those inner truths.
Well, only the data can help reveal those inner truths. I mean, there's no point of having this discussion if we're not looking at the data.
Perfect. And so
go ahead.
Great
example. One of our coworkers has been dealing with some chronic health issues for a long time, and asked me, a couple months ago, what are some things that I should be thinking about in terms of running labs? And he just ran TMAO, and it was off the charts high, and he had never run it before. And this is one of the potential markers for choline being harmful for people with prostate cancer. So why is it that if this individual has had prostate cancer and in active treatment, for a long period of time, that it has taken him how many years to run a TMAO?
Yeah. So that's just it. It's like we've come a long way where we actually have ways to look under the hood and tell a better story than maybe the story we're telling ourselves.
Yeah. I mean, we should at least be curious about, are there biomarkers that could give us clues about where we are in our state of health?
I love it. I love it. And so this question I've been dying to ask you because I kind of want to see what soapboxes might come out to play, but I would like for you to tell me something you think is true that nobody else would agree with you on.
Well, there's a lot. I mean, this is a hard question for me because I disagree with a lot of people on a lot of things, because maybe this is because I'm a little bit on the spectrum.
It's one of your most enduring qualities.
But I just think in general that, there are so many people that don't observe the little subtle nuances of anything that they do. And I think that I get caught up in looking so deeply into things that I just see things that other people, not that I'm like trying to say that I'm clairvoyant or anything, but I just have this like tunnel vision focus that allows me to see things that other people don't. Whether it's, I've been working on a plumbing project and I'm finding things in our plumbing like, oh my God, how did the person that installed this not see this when they were doing it? And part of that's just because, it's part of my learning disability, but it's also part of my talent in life that I see the imperfections that most other people miss. And because of that, there's a lot of things that I disagree with. But if you want just one,
yes,
plant-based detergents are not saving the environment. So stop saying that.
So this, by the way, is like an ongoing fight in our household, because I definitely don't want the Cascade residues in my dish soap. So we have to find a better way.
And when you replace, I get it that the fragrances in Cascade are horrible. But we don't like, how do you find a naturally occurring, now you have to know the difference between a soap and a detergent to really get this. Because a soap is made from naturally occurring fats and they're negatively charged. If you have high minerals in your water, a negatively charged surfactant is never, ever, ever in your lifetime under any circumstances going to work. Never. So throw away your plant-based soaps in the kitchen, especially if you have hard water. This is where you actually need us. This is where a synthetic detergent actually shines. And this is where I'm bummed we don't have phosphate detergents anymore. And
Hmm.
here's the bummer. All right, here's what nobody will agree with me on is that phosphate detergents were not destroying the environment. They were just put in the wrong place. If we would have had gray water systems on our homes in the 1970s when we were using phosphate detergents, our gardens would have fed the entire planet. There is nothing better to improve your soil than a phosphate detergent. And this is why back east and all over the world where phosphate detergents were considered an environmental problem, the problem was these detergents were going into the sewage treatment and the sewage treatment had no way to remove them. So they would go out into the rivers and clog the rivers with algae
Hmm.
because it propagated so much plant growth that the rivers couldn't handle it. So the problem was not the phosphate detergent, it is where we were putting our wastewater. If we would have put that on our crops, unbelievably different world we live in today.
This so strikes me as a good metaphor for so much of the path we're going down in
Mm-hmm.
talking about even metabolic health in general. So when we have over 96% of the population in the United States and likely globally dealing with a metabolic disease, what you're describing, it's like we're blaming something else. We're looking
Yeah.
through one lens when the reality is something entirely different. And that there's a solution within a different paradigm. And so does that bring up anything for you that you might tie that incredible anecdote together with something in the metabolic health space to land with people in a different way?
Saturated fat. Saturated fat, like phosphate detergents, has been given a bad name. And granted, there are some genetic polymorphisms. Some people are genetically predispositioned to not handle as much saturated fat as others. And I want that to be the caveat for everything that we say is that we are biochemically individual. And I bet if we looked hard enough and ran enough labs, we could probably find somebody that will do good on a vegetarian diet or a vegan diet,
Absolutely. Yeah.
but not the majority of the population. We recently had a discussion with a friend of ours who's a doctor and got into a debate about high fructose diet versus ketogenic diet. And our friend's argument was that fructose is good and there's this cycle called the Randall cycle and it is a healthy sugar. And I just wanted to scream because he he is so metabolically fit in his 70s that he can handle that. But if 63, what is the percentage now? 63% of the American population have type 2 diabetes. Is that correct?
That's well over half, well beyond half now, almost two-thirds. Yeah.
So I can assure you that what our friend was referring to is about 1% of the population can do this high fructose diet and be fine with it. 1%.
Well,
And so
even in
when
the
I,
conversation with him, Steve, he agreed that once you're metabolically flexible, metabolically healthy, you have a
yeah,
little bit more leeway.
but nobody's metabolically healthy. If
Exactly.
63% of our population is type 2 diabetic, that's the train wreck. So just know that when we're talking about metabolic health, type 2 diabetes is the exact opposite. This is the antithesis. And if you are type 2 diabetic, this is the worst case scenario for you as an individual for your metabolic health.
And so that's a heavy, heavy bag to lay down here. So you know me,
Well, do
I
I need
never
to
give
give you
the
the
bad news.
background?
Well, no. Well, I mean, I don't want to give you the we want people to hear sort of the hard truths, right? But
Yeah.
we also have to show them the hope and the possibility. and the potential, because you're not a victim to this. And so I think that's a perfect segue into what one thing would you strongly recommend to anyone wanting to take inventory of or improving upon their metabolic health, be it a diabetic diagnosis, a cancer diagnosis, cardiovascular diagnosis, a mental health diagnosis, Alzheimer's, you name it. Any one of those are a flavor of metabolic mitochondrial disease. So what might be your first fundamental, simple, low-hanging fruit that makes the biggest bang for its buck for those who feel a bit deflated from what you just said?
Get pissed at the high fructose corn syrup.
No, that you've already done really good with that. You've covered that terrain really well.
Well, all right. Let me back up a little bit and explain my family history a little bit more. We talked about my dad's type 2 diabetes and his, and my dad, I think it was the same generation as Wilford Brimley, and that same kind of common sense. Well, you just need to eat healthy. Push it, I'm like, no, Dad, it's not. It's
your canned peaches on cottage cheese, maybe not the best option.
Yeah. And, and so my dad died at 82 years old, which I think was young. I think that had he been able to mentally manage his type 2 diabetes, and the reason I say mentally manage is because at one point I was in my dad's nursing home after about his 15th stroke, and he was like, "Who the hell are you? And why are you telling me not to eat donuts? Get out of here." And at that point, I was like, "Well, Dad, I'm one of your 7 sons, the one you obviously don't like anymore, because all I do is harp on you about what you eat." And I just asked him, "Dad, what would you rather? Would you rather live and get out of the wheelchair and reverse the damage from your stroke, or do you want to eat donuts?" "Well, if I can't eat donuts, I'd rather die." "Okay, my work here is done, and I pray for your soul." And it got worse in my family because I lost my brother Martin at 63 years old to complications of type 2 diabetes because he mostly lived on fast food and Coke. Yeah. And so if I were to say if you were to do one thing, cook. Our friend Chris Smith, he is the most brilliant neurosurgeon at Barrows Neurological. He loves Nasha's book, and last year at the Society of Integrative Oncology in Scottsdale, he got up in front of the entire conference, and on his PowerPoints, he gave these case studies of these are 3 patients that followed the metabolic approach. This is pre-op, post-op. He showed imaging. He showed images of their incisions. He gave the whole case presentation of the patients that were following the metabolic approach and the patients that weren't. Every patient that was following the metabolic approach, their surgeries were less invasive. He was talking about this radiation where they put beads into the tumor while they're during the operation. So that during surgery, they implant beads in the tumor so that post-op they can do focused radiation because the beads will intensify the radiation locally. He said that the radiation dose for the patients on the metabolic approach were lower, the operations were less invasive, and they healed faster on the metabolic approach. Even their incisions healed faster. I mean, everybody knows that diabetes wound care is one of the most horrible parts of type 2 diabetes. Like, I think that this is just common knowledge because everybody's grandma has died of type 2 diabetes, and everybody's aunt has died of type 2 diabetes by this time. And what Chris said during his talk, he showed a slide that showed the cover of the Metabolic Approach to Cancer, and he, gave a beautiful shout out to Nasha. And he said, "This book changed my life." And this is a neurosurgeon. He's saying, "I changed the way I eat, and I enjoy cooking now like I never did in my life, and it transformed my health." And he said, "I thought I was healthy until I read the Metabolic Approach, and then I fine-tuned everything, and it was all with food that I love to eat and I enjoy doing every second of it." And so if you do one thing, cook. Learn how to cook one dish that is whole foods, that doesn't have anything processed in it, and eat that one dish every night for the rest of your life if that's the level of your cooking. But get curious.
Mm,
Get curious about what foods can I eat that are going to empower me to be more healthy.
I love it. And I love that the word curiosity. It's come up a lot in our conversation today. And so I think,
It has
well,
to.
well, yes, but I want to know for you, because you are such a consumer of so much information at all times. I mean, you literally can redo the plumbing in our house, go build out a data platform, cook a gourmet meal, like do a healthcare consultation, teach an epigenetic course. I mean, you're like literally, it freaks me out what you're able to do. I don't know where this came from, but it's pretty awesome. So, on that note, what is piquing your curiosity today? Could be anything. I don't care what it is. Like it could be about toad spawn or something. I don't know. Like, what is piquing your curiosity right now?
DNL beta hydroxybutyrate. I am obsessed.
Tell
I
me,
am
tell us more. Tell us more. Fifth graders, fifth graders.
Okay. So if you're not familiar with the term ketone bodies are the most simplistic way to say it is ketone bodies are the end result of burning fat as a fuel. And here's the thing, most people don't have never been in ketosis in their adult life or even as a child. Maybe when they were breastfeeding they were. But because the standard American diet is so high in processed sugar and processed carbohydrates and just junk nutrients, that most people never cycle back into a normal state of burning fat as a fuel. And the major byproduct of burning fat as a fuel is beta hydroxybutyrate produced in the liver. Now, there are a lot of molecules in nature that have a right-handed form. See if I can do this, a right-handed form and a left-handed form. The reason that is important is because our bodies are, let's just say that they're right-handed. So think about it like this. If you have a molecule in your body that is the right-handed form and your body is like a right-handed baseball glove, the left-handed form of that molecule is not going to fit in the right-handed baseball glove, right? This is in chemistry, we call this stereochemistry. And this is the holy grail of pharmaceutical design because when I'm a drug design chemist by training, this is what I studied in grad school, and we design drugs that if the drug is the left-handed form, it's not going to work. We learned this the hard way with thalidomide because the drug thalidomide was developed as the left-handed form, but when it was marketed, it was sold as a mixture of the right and left-handed form, and the right-handed form gave severe birth defects. So back to beta hydroxybutyrate. So in your liver, you only produce the left-handed form. We call that D. No, I'm saying it backwards. It's D beta hydroxybutyrate is produced in your liver from the breakdown of fat. It's released into your bloodstream. It goes to your brain. It goes to your heart. It goes to your muscles. And your peripheral tissues, the brain, heart, and the muscles, turn it into a fuel that can produce ATP. The reason I'm so obsessed with this is because there's a lot of debate in the scientific community about whether D is the naturally occurring form or L is a naturally occurring form. Some people say that D is the only naturally occurring form and that L is not naturally occurring. And there's evidence that under certain conditions in specific cells in your body, your body will produce L form of beta hydroxybutyrate. But I'm obsessed with this because as a scientist, when I see one paper saying that the L is not naturally occurring, and then I see evidence in another paper where this other research group is saying we measured L beta hydroxybutyrate being produced under these conditions in these cells, that makes me think we don't understand this completely. And now I'm obsessed with getting a $20 million lab built so that we can actually figure this thing out.
I love it. I love it. And so that's actually a really good next question. Like, what types of questions, what are we not asking yet? Like, what do you feel maybe questions we should be asking in the space of metabolic health, in the space of therapeutic ketosis, ketone bodies, or anything that you want to talk about? But I think in this conversation, more specific to the metabolic environment.
Yeah. So my world is metabolomics. And what metabolomics is looking at all of the different parts that are produced as you turn your food into energy.
Beautiful.
So think about it like this. If you have a diesel engine and you're pumping diesel into your gas tank, you turn it on, the exhaust from your diesel is going to have different parts in it than the exhaust in your gasoline powered automobile. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The
Yeah.
reason the reason the exhaust is different on a gasoline engine than a diesel engine is because they use different fuels
Hmm.
and they metabolize those fuels differently.
Beautiful.
So the other day we're driving down the road and what Nasha's super sensitive to hydrocarbons. So we're driving down the road. There's a beater truck in front of us that obviously hasn't had a tune-up in the life of the truck, and it's spewing more gasoline out of the exhaust. I mean, you can smell gasoline in the exhaust, so it's not burning anything.
Right.
And this is how most people are operating. You know, if you imagine yourself, you're a human being, and you're not eating the right fuel that your body needs, and your body's not tuned up, you're going to smell like that beater truck going down the road spewing gasoline out your exhaust.
Yeah.
Did that
Yeah.
answer your question?
I think so.
I don't
So
even remember what the original
I
question was.
figured as much. So I'm going to help you out here. This is also the role we play. In the where was Steve going with this conversation, which is endless hours of entertainment at dinner parties. But the main question is, what questions should we be asking specifically? So you were starting to talk about the fuel sources and how we're burning them. Should we be asking which fuel, like what are we burning? How do we know what we're burning? You see where I'm going?
Yeah, we need to know what is the result of the fuel that we're burning. What is the residue? So here's another diesel analogy. Diesel engines now require diesel exhaust fluid,
Oh yeah.
DEF. So now in countries that have emissions, you have to put diesel exhaust fluid into your diesel when you operate it. And what that diesel exhaust fluid does is it just breaks up deposits in your exhaust.
Interesting. Hmm.
And you don't need that in a gasoline powered car because the particulate matter in a gasoline exhaust is much lower than that in a diesel. But this is an example of even if you're using the right fuel, are you getting buildup in your exhaust from metabolic processes that are happening in your body?
Hmm.
And this is where metabolomics comes in. In metabolomics, we do analysis of your urine, we do analysis of your blood, we can do analysis of biopsies. And what we do is we look at what are the end result or the intermediate result of the fuels that your body is burning, and can we fine tune that? And all right, I just watched a video this morning of a diesel mechanic who is using a dyno and sophisticated pressure gauges to tune the turbo on his diesel.
And that
He's
was just
saying,
for fun. Before the sun rose, you were just digging into this. Right. Carry on. Carry on.
so, and this guy used the analogy, and he was showing on the power curve on the dyno, at this RPM, this turbo should be running, I'm just making numbers up. This turbo should be running like 10,000 RPM to give you the pressure on your intake manifold so that your engine is actually getting the benefit of having a turbo. But what he was showing is this is some backyard mechanic that tuned this turbo, and it's way outside of the performance curve that was designed for the operation of this turbo. And this is what's happening with our bodies is we're putting in the wrong fuel. We don't have the right spark plugs for the fuel because we're taking some garbage form of B12 that doesn't even operate in our body. And because of that, it's like we're getting deposits in our exhaust that are decreasing our power and our longevity.
I love it. And these are really great because I mean, you use B12 as an example, but that was just as an example. So when the listeners hear this later, they're not going to know that you were being literal with the B12. It's more just an example of we're putting garbage in, so we're getting garbage out.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty
Yeah,
straightforward.
it's just one example. When you think about this in the most simplistic way, B12 is a cofactor. It's like a spark plug in your engine of your car. If you don't have the right spark plugs in your car, is your car going to operate effectively? Probably not. I mean, I think that's a pretty simple, easy to understand way to think about how we approach nutrition. We have individual needs. I'm not going to be putting Datsun spark plugs into my body because I'm built like a diesel. And I operate like a diesel. I'm not a sprinter. I've never been a sprinter, but I can run all day long at a very slow pace, or I can ride my bike all day long, or I can work all day long at a very slow pace, but I'm not going to move fast in this lifetime.
First of all, I think we're going to have to do some couples counseling over what does diesel mean to you? Because it's clearly an important analogy you keep going back to, which I'm intrigued. It's really helpful, actually, really, really perfect with this conversation. But to bring this all around, because your brain, we could go down so many different rabbit holes, and I hope that we can have more and more conversation. And in fact, you're going to be interviewing people on this podcast, especially those who speak more your language over time as well. So I'm excited for folks to tune in for that in the future. But tell us in this moment, what is your favorite current tool, hack, program, whatever it is, there's no right or wrong answer, that you are currently using to tune up your own metabolic health?
Fasting, without a doubt. And this is, I know Nasha's, she's so thankful I'm saying this, not because she's right, but because this is probably the most important thing I've ever done for my health in my entire life.
And to be completely transparent, this man was the biggest
avoider
of fasting. He was I have to eat every 2 hours or I'm going to die for 20 some years. And now this is a new addition and it's rocking. You're rocking it.
I think that hangry should be considered a biomarker for being metabolically broken because poor Nasha, oh my God, do you remember when we were coming home from the bakery in Durango with Justin?
Oh yeah, we'd been on a climbing trip, or we were on our way to a climbing trip, mountain climbing trip. Yeah.
And to make a 26-hour story short, it's a family thing. We are storytellers. So we had gone to our favorite bakery in Durango after climbing in Moab for a few days, and we're starving. And we were with our friend Justin. And this is our first kind of road trip with Justin. And I had grabbed my bag of day-old pastries because it's like $2.50 for a dozen random pastries. And I'm sitting in the back of Justin's car as he's driving us back to our friend's house where we're staying. And I'm like 3 pastries in, and Justin was like, oh my God, do I have to stop the car? You have just gone from 0 to asshole in nothing flat. I think that there's a problem with your blood sugar here.
Amen. I was so happy for that.
Nasha was like, oh my God, somebody else said it. And just understand that for me, there's the other part of my family that we haven't talked about yet is there is a pattern of mental illness in my family. My oldest brother was on lithium for bipolar, and had a doctor gotten their hands on me, I would have been on lithium for bipolar as well. And for me, eliminating grains from my diet was the first big step towards being a functional bipolar. I mean, bipolar doesn't go away. Like if I went back on that diet, I would be insane.
And divorced.
I'd be homeless. But the key for me was that eating this bag of day olds after exercising in the desert, I was I think I was probably 25 pounds lighter than I am now. So there was not a lot of reserve. But that hangry, everybody knows the hangries. When you don't eat and you get nervous, this is what my mom always said about my dad. Oh, Bill's getting nervous. We're going to have to pull over for lunch. Like, oh no, don't say anything on the road trip because dad's about to have his moment before. And my mom just said, oh, he's getting nervous. And one of the things that Nasha has had to tolerate in our marriage is my mood swings from thinking that I need food. And that's the thing that I think fasting has been the most important for me, is that mental battle. And here's what I think happens is those carbohydrates, when I'm eating this sugar laden pastry, what's happening is serotonin, dopamine, and it's not a balance. Remember that cocaine is a dopamine reuptake inhibitor. So pharmacologically, cocaine is a great example of all things dopamine derangement. And if you've ever been around anybody on cocaine, this is the dopamine deranged personality. And this is what happened to me when I go on a sugar binge. Is sugar causes a release of dopamine in your brain exactly like cocaine. There's no difference to it. I don't know why sugar is legal, but cocaine is not. I mean, same white powdery substance, same dopamine response. The only thing different is cocaine doesn't cause an insulin response. So it's probably less harmful for you than sugar in the long run. But point is...
Disclaimer. Danger.
Well, but also remember, I won't go there. Cocaine is a highly refined plant product, just as sugar is a highly refined plant product. And if you chew on sugar cane, just as the people in the Andes chew on coca leaves, it's not the fact that cocaine is such a horrible thing. It's the fact that it's been so highly purified that it just absolutely wreaks havoc on your biochemistry. And this is kind of the basis of all biochemistry, is anything that's that highly purified probably is going to make you crazy.
I love it.
Whether it's sugar or cocaine.
I think this is a lovely kind of place to round this out, because Steve and I also had the absolute pleasure. He and his sister, Janet, and Steve and I were in London at a big medical conference, and we got to share a taxi with Dr. Chris Palmer, who wrote an amazing book called Brain Energy. So anyone who wants to go down the rabbit hole of mental illness and the effects of metabolic disorders on mental illness, mental expression, what Steve just spoke to is not just an N of one anecdotal story. There's entire organizations. Metabolic psychiatry is an up and coming field, which is beautiful, just like the field of metabolic oncology, metabolic cardiology. And that's why we hope you all keep coming back here for more, to keep having these conversations. But Steve, I think that was one of the coolest things. And the 30 plus years, you've really only engaged with the fasting maybe over the last 3 years. And so this is relatively new for you. And I've personally seen some of the biggest changes in many of your physical sensations around going hungry or skipping a meal, or just maintaining mood and maintaining energy, vitality, both in you, but I've been a faster for 30 some years before that. So it's just really beautiful to watch that it's never too late. And I really was pleased. I had no idea how you were going to answer that question. And I think it's really great that you kind of also laid down on the table here another free, accessible tool for
They
anybody.
can't tax you to fast.
They can't tax you to fast. That might be the perfect.
They can tax your high fructose corn syrup, but they can't tax you fasting.
I love it. Steve, thank you. Thank you for this amazing, brilliant conversation. I love that people got to get into your brain for a little bit and see what I get to splash around in on a regular basis. Thank you for being my partner in all things in my life, and for being on this journey with me and changing the world of medicine in general and metabolic oncology in particular. And I can't wait to see what your brilliant brain continues to learn and where it will take all of us in the future. Thank you so much.
My honor, of course, and always.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Metabolic Matters. We hope you found today's conversation insightful and empowering. As we wrap up today's episode, we want to take a moment to acknowledge the incredible team and supporters who make this podcast possible. First, we'd like to thank our production team, Alex Sanchez, Cindy Kennedy, Jessica Gilman, and Lynn Hughes for their hard work behind the scenes. Our theme song was written by Julie Newmark and performed by Whiskey Flower. And finally, we want to thank you, our listeners, for tuning in and being a part of the Metabolic Matters community. Do you want to learn more? Please visit our website, metabolicmatters.org, and you can follow us on Instagram. If you liked this episode, please leave us a review and share it with your friends and family. And if you want to help support our mission, spreading awareness and knowledge about metabolic health, reach out. We'd love you to join with us. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell to stay updated on upcoming episodes. We have so much exciting content coming your way. Until next time, stay curious, stay empowered, and remember, your metabolic health matters.